Taqiyyah means protection or prudence. It's an Islamic practice that allows believers to conceal their faith or intentions when under threat of persecution or harm, not just for survival, but for deception. Particularly in Western democracies, it's a symbol of the distrust between Islam and the West. The Christmas market attack in Magdeburg is a tragic reminder. A black BMW tears through a Christmas market in Magdeburg, Germany. 5 lives lost, 200 injured. The holiday cheer shattered in moments. But the shockwaves did not end there. Soon, attention turned to the attacker, Talib Al Abdulmohsen, a Saudi refugee, an ex-Muslim atheist, or so he claimed. But was he really an atheist, or was this all part of a deeper plan? A concept in Islam called Taqiyyah is now at the center of this debate. In today's episode, we'll unpack Taqiyyah, what it means, how it's been used historically, and why critics argue it's being weaponized in Western democracies. I'm Manish Adhikary, and you're watching the India Today Culture Project. Let's start with the basics. Taqiyyah means protection or prudence. It's an Islamic practice that allows believers to conceal their faith or intentions when under threat of persecution or harm. Historically, it's been a survival mechanism, most notably used by Shia Muslims who faced persecution from Sunni majority groups for centuries. It's even rooted in the Quran, which says, "Let not believers take disbelievers as allies, except when taking precaution against them in prudence." But here's where it gets tricky. Critics argue that Taqiyyah has expanded beyond its original intent. Some believe it's being used not just for survival, but for deception, particularly in Western democracies, where Muslim minorities are accused of masking their true intentions until they gain enough influence to implement Islamic laws, including Sharia courts. This Washington Post article from 2015, for instance, said that the argument that Taqiyyah permits a Muslim to lie with impunity to non-believers largely stems from these two parts of the Quran. The second part is, "Let not the believers take unbelievers for their allies in preference to believers. Whoever does this has no connection with God unless you but guard yourselves against them as a precaution." Let's address this head on. Critics of Taqiyyah often cite cases where Muslim leaders or activists are accused of using democratic freedoms to gradually introduce Islamic laws in non-Muslim countries. They argue that Taqiyyah gives some individuals the license to present a moderate face publicly while pursuing radical goals privately. A commonly cited example is the rise of Sharia councils in parts of Europe, particularly the UK, where Islamic courts handle issues like marriage, divorce, and inheritance for Muslim communities. Critics claim these councils undermine national laws and promote practices incompatible with democratic values. They also point to instances where individuals initially denied any intention to support Sharia but later championed it once they had gained political or social power. This is the fear fueling suspicion in cases like Talib's. Did he use Taqiyyah to build an image of a harmless ex-Muslim atheist while secretly working towards extremist goals? Did this doctrine enable him to deceive the German authorities who granted him asylum? But here's the other side of the debate. Most Muslims, both Sunni and Shia, don't even practice Taqiyyah. In fact, many modern Islamic scholars argue that Taqiyyah is largely misunderstood and misrepresented. It's not a blanket license to deceive, but a situational practice meant for life-threatening circumstances. For example, during the Spanish Inquisition, when Muslims and Jews were forced to convert to Christianity or face execution, Taqiyyah allowed them to outwardly conform while secretly maintaining their faith. This wasn't taking over Spain, it was about surviving genocide. So while some critics claim Taqiyyah is being used to manipulate Western democracies, others argue that these fears are exaggerated and based on isolated incidents rather than widespread behavior. Talib's story complicates the narrative. On one hand, he publicly declared himself an atheist, helped other ex-Muslims flee persecution, and even aligned himself with Germany's far-right AfD party, which has an anti-Islam agenda. On the other hand, ex-Muslims who knew him claimed he harassed activists, particularly Saudi women, and accused him of being a Shia extremist using Taqiyyah to infiltrate their community. Talib also allegedly exploited Western systems to his advantage. He secured asylum in Germany, avoiding extradition to Saudi Arabia, despite serious charges of terrorism and human trafficking against him. And when German authorities were warned about his potential for violence, his carefully cultivated image may have caused them to overlook the threat. As far as Europe is concerned, this isn't just about one man. It's about the challenge of separating genuine asylum seekers from those who might exploit the system. How do governments balance compassion with security? How do they ensure that doctrines like Taqiyyah aren't weaponized to sow distrust? Let's be clear, the fear that Taqiyyah could be used for deceit isn't baseless. Cases like Talib Al Abdul Zaidis, an Afghan migrant in the UK who faked a conversion to Christianity to gain asylum, these cases show that deception does happen. But it's equally important not to let these cases fuel blanket mistrust of entire communities. Most Muslims living in the West are simply trying to build better lives for themselves and their families. They are not plotting to implement Sharia codes to undermine democracy. The challenge lies in addressing individual cases of exploitation without stigmatizing entire populations. The story of Taqiyyah is as complex as the people who practice it. For some, it's a lifeline in the face of persecution. For others, it's a tool of deception. And for critics, it's a symbol of the distrust between Islam and the West, a distrust that cases like Talib's only deepen. At the heart of it all is a question we must grapple with. How do we protect the vulnerable without opening the door to exploitation? It's a delicate balance, one that demands both vigilance and empathy. The Christmas market attack in Magdeburg is a tragic reminder of the complexities of identity, faith and deception. Whether Talib was practicing Taqiyyah or simply exploiting a system, his actions have cast a shadow on communities already struggling to be understood. Thank you for watching the India Today Culture Project. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical and keep exploring the stories that shape our world.